Here's an example of a sample analysis that uses all of the terms, the structural elements of visual art. The work I've chosen for this analysis is Dante Rossetti's painting, The Daydream, composed in 1880. Dante Rossetti was a member of a painters group, an artist group called the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, and one of their artistic aims was to paint in a way that evoked stories and narratives, that evoked former times, perhaps the good old knightly days, days of mythology and legend. In this painting, let me show you how the elements of visual art are expressed. The first thing that strikes me with this painting is color. This painting is full of green. The dress of the woman is a certain green. The leaves are a yellowy green, and the shadowy bits at the bottom of the painting are also darker shades of green. I see pops of color on top of the green, the red rose that she's holding and the berry-like plants or something there down towards the bottom third of the work, and in details on the backs of the leaves. Green and red are contrasting colors. I guess that's why they pop so well. Also, knowing a little bit about plants growing, really new growing plants put out their leaves with reddish color. It's not until they're mature, established leaves that they become green. So perhaps this is a painting of spring, early spring. I also see some negative space hidden, in this case, behind a lot of really filled positive space, so that we look through the trees and realize that there's clear space out there in the background, the sky in the background. It's really interesting. It makes us feel like we're inside this painting with the woman. Maybe we're sitting in a grove of trees in the middle of the forest. I'm also struck by several lines in this work, by the curves around the back of her head and her back, and especially the curve of the arm that's upraised hanging onto the tree branch. There are lots of these gentle curves. In fact, I think my mother would say she's not sitting up very straight. Her posture's kind of slouchy for someone that's having her portrait painted. Her hand over the book is also curved. Her fingers are curved. They're very passive or idle. In a way, she's giving an impression of either being completely relaxed or not being entirely thrilled that she's having her picture painted. Of course, her expression has something to do with that as well, and that has to do with the subject of the painting. I'll touch on that at the very end of this presentation. The shapes that I see, well, I see her face, her head makes a sort of vague circle, and there's an enclosed space that is taken up by her entire body. And that's easy to see because of the value of the darker green of her dress compared to the lighter value of the leaves around her. If I follow the motions of the leaves, there is a kind of neat swirly line or shape if you go from the top of the painting near her head and then down around her arms, around her waist, and down to her feet. Actually, these leaves and tree limbs seem to be enclosing her. She seems to be wound around with leaves and trees. Let's see, color, space, shape, value, line, form. The form of this work, in its geometrical expression, well, perhaps if I thought of her as three-dimensional, the way she's sitting would come out to be a kind of a pyramid, since her head is the narrowest point, and her whole body seems to sort of move outward in triangular planes from that point. Form from an organizational standpoint, the divisions of the leaves in this work seem to give it unity to me. There's leaves at the top, there's leaves at her waist level, and there's leaves at the foot level, kind of behind her. In fact, the leaves move from being in front of her, around her, and behind her. That's an element of form, I think, and it links towards the impression of the subject that she's in fact surrounded by these leaves. The woman sitting for this portrait was a family friend of Dante Rossetti. Actually, she was the wife of his best friend. And Dante Rossetti wanted to have an affair with her for years and years. And it just never worked out from her point of view. She didn't really want to do that. She seems to be showing in her facial expression a real dissatisfaction with her situation. Maybe she's feeling trapped in all of these painters' wishes and desires. Or is Dante not portraying her own state of mind, but is he portraying a mythical state of mind? The daydream. The subject of this painting is gazing off into space, lost in thought. We can't tell what she's thinking, maybe. But she doesn't have any emotion left for us because she's so distracted by whatever it is that she's thinking of. Rossetti's painting uses all the elements of art very strongly and leaves us with a tantalizing subject to ponder.